A young man sits in a room with the lights low, phone in hand, another evening scrolling past. Somewhere in the back of his mind, there is a quiet voice telling him to take life seriously, to pray, to train his body, to guard his eyes, to use his strength before it fades. But there is another voice too, louder, smoother, much more patient. You have time. You are young. Relax. You can get serious about faith later. You can fix your habits later. You can deal with the wounds, the addictions, the compromises later. Right now, just live. And so, another night passes. Another week passes. Another year. And the quiet voice in the back of his mind is still waiting. This is not a story about fear. This is not a story about guilt. This is not a story about missing out on joy. This is a story about every seed planted in youth that grows into a tree you cannot uproot later, because the Bible does not treat youth as a throwaway decade. It does not picture young people as children waiting to matter. Scripture treats youth as a window of strength, training, temptation, calling, and formation, and it plants one warning at the center of it all, spoken by an old king at the end of a very full life. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come. The Hebrew word for remember is zakar. It does not mean occasionally recall. It means live with God continually in view. Keep Him before your face. Let Him shape your choices, your loves, your time, your body, your words, your direction. And the warning is not arbitrary. Solomon, the man who wrote it, knew exactly what he was warning against. You need to understand who Solomon was. He was young once. He was gifted. He had wisdom poured into him by God. He built the temple. He wrote Proverbs. He had wealth, power, respect, and desire. He had everything a young person dreams of having, and he chased every pleasure a young person dreams of chasing. And at the end of his life, he called it hevel, vapor, breath on a cold morning, not because God had failed him, because he had spent years living as if God were optional. And by the time he turned back, he could feel what those years had taken. That is the weight behind Ecclesiastes. The old king looks at the young person and says something most people do not want to say out loud. Youth does not last. Time is not neutral. Every year you spend drifting, avoiding, delaying, indulging, and postponing is not just passing. It is forming you. It is building a person. It is planting roots that will be difficult to pull up when you are older and weaker and more tired and more set in your ways. Here's what most people miss. The biggest danger of youth is not rebellion. It is postponement. Most young people are not openly shaking their fist at God. They are not burning bridges. They are simply delaying. I will get serious at 30. I will deal with my habits after college. I will pursue God when I settle down. But what happens in the meantime? Desires form, patterns harden, wounds settle deeper, pride grows roots, comfort becomes a king, and the person who said I will change later wakes up years later and discovers that later has arrived and he cannot remember how he got here. Solomon is not being cruel. He is being honest. And he knew this from his own life. Because Solomon did not start as a fool. He started as a young man who asked God for wisdom instead of riches. God was so pleased with that request that he gave Solomon wisdom and riches and honor and a long life. But somewhere along the way, the very blessings God gave him became distractions. The foreign wives turned his heart. The luxury dulled his urgency. The years of comfort silenced the voice that once burned for God. And the old king wrote Ecclesiastes as a warning from the end of the road. Do not wait until your body is failing, and your desires are spent, and your energy is gone, to remember the one who gave you your life. Remember him now, while strength is still in your limbs, while hunger is still in your soul, while desire can still be trained and directed and offered to God before it twists into something destructive. But it gets stranger. The Bible also shows young people who refuse to postpone. Joseph is maybe the sharpest example. He was 17 years old when his brothers sold him into slavery. 17. Think about what that means. He was not old enough to have a career. He was not old enough to be respected. He had no credentials, no freedom, no safety, no control over his own life. He was a teenager in chains, dragged into a foreign country, sold like livestock. And what did Joseph do with his youth? He did not waste it in bitterness. He served in Potiphar's house with such faithfulness that the Egyptian noticed. Then he was falsely accused by Potiphar's wife and thrown into prison for years. Again, his youth was spent in darkness. And again, Joseph served. He interpreted dreams. He cared for prisoners. He walked with God in a place where God seemed absent. He could have said, "I am too young for this. I am not ready. I will get serious about faith when my life is not falling apart. I will obey God when things make sense." He did not say that, and those years of hidden faithfulness, while he was still young, still unknown, still imprisoned, prepared him to save Egypt. Here is the part nobody tells you. Youth is not preparation for life. Youth is life. And the habits you build, the faithfulness you practice, the loves you train, the God you pursue in private while nobody is watching, those are the very things that will carry you when the weight gets heavy. The public Joseph who stood before Pharaoh did not appear suddenly. He was forged in the private Joseph who served when it made no sense, who resisted temptation when no one would have known, who trusted God when every visible reason to trust had been stripped away. Most people want the palace. Few people want the prison years that build the person who can handle the palace. Stay with me. Jesus told a story about a young man who demanded his inheritance early, the prodigal son. You know the outline. He asked for his share of the father's wealth. He took it to a far country. He wasted it on wild living. And when the money ran out, so did the friends, the parties, and the illusion that freedom without wisdom was actually freedom. He ended up feeding pigs, so hungry he wanted what the pigs were eating. That is the Bible's picture of wasted youth. Not that he was evil, not that he hated his father, not that he set out to destroy his life. He simply wanted freedom on his own terms. He wanted the gifts without the giver. He wanted pleasure without boundaries. He wanted to be in charge of his own life. And by the time he woke up, the inheritance was gone, the friends were gone, and the dignity was gone. The story has a beautiful ending. The father runs to him. The son is welcomed home. Grace is real. But notice something. The wasted inheritance does not come back. The years in the far country do not come back. The scars from those choices do not disappear. Forgiveness restores the son to the father. It does not restore what the sin consumed. That is a painful truth most people do not want to hear when they are young. God will forgive you later, but sin will not give back what it took: the time, the purity, the strength, the opportunities, the trust, the reputation, the integrity, the vision, the first love, the habits that could have been trained toward God but were instead trained toward self. Grace heals guilt. Grace does not rewind the clock. Now watch what happens next. Paul writes to a young leader named Timothy and says something countercultural. Let no one despise you for your youth, but set the believers an example in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, in purity. In the ancient world, age was authority. Young people were expected to stay quiet, learn slowly, and wait their turn. But Paul refuses to let Timothy use age as an excuse for spiritual immaturity. You are young, so be an example. Not someday, not when you are older, not when people respect you. Now. The Greek word for youth here is neotes. It means the season of young life, the age of inexperience by normal standards. And Paul says, do not let anyone dismiss you because of it. Set the standard. That means your youth is not a permission slip for laziness. It is not a hall pass for compromise. It is not a season where God lowers his expectations. Timothy was called to purity because he was young, to faithfulness because he was young, to disciplined speech, sincere love, tested faith because he was young, and the enemy would target him precisely there. Paul also tells him to flee youthful passions. That word, epithumia, does not only mean sexual temptation. It means disordered desires of many kinds. The craving for approval, the hunger for pleasure, the drive to be seen, the lust for control, the desperate need to fit in, the pull toward comfort over calling. Paul does not say manage them. He says flee them, run. Because youthful energy is not wrong in itself. But if it is not directed toward God, it will be directed toward something that destroys. A young horse has strength. But if it is not trained, that strength breaks fences and shatters legs. So Paul trains Timothy. Pursue righteousness. Pursue faith. Pursue love. Pursue peace. Train yourself for godliness, not because Timothy was weak, because he was young. And then, there is Daniel. Daniel was taken to Babylon as a young exile when he was probably still in his teens, stripped of country, temple, language, name, and family, placed in a royal training program designed to turn captured Hebrew boys into Babylonian officials. And very early in the story, Daniel makes a quiet decision. He resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food. Nobody else was watching. Nobody from Jerusalem would have known. He could have eaten the food, drunk the wine, and kept his faith private. But Daniel decided before the test came. That is the difference. Most people wait until temptation arrives to figure out what they believe. Daniel decided in the quiet, in the routine, before anyone was looking. And because he decided early, he was ready when pressure arrived. That one small decision about food shaped a life of public courage. Later, Daniel would face the lion's den. But the man who faced lions was already formed by the young man who refused to defile himself at the dinner table. Pay attention to this. If you wait until the crisis to start obeying, you will fold under pressure. The crisis reveals who you are. It does not create who you are. You are being formed right now in the small choices, in the private moments, in the habits nobody sees. And those small choices will either become your foundation or your collapse. Before David faced Goliath, he was in a field with sheep. Before the giant, there were lions and bears. Before the throne, there was the wilderness. David did not become brave the day he picked up the stone. He became brave during the years when nobody was watching, when he fought to protect a flock that was not even his, when he practiced faithfulness in the dark and the cold and the loneliness. Goliath only revealed what the shepherd years had already built. That is the biblical pattern. God trains people in hidden places. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before he led Israel out of Egypt. Jesus spent 30 years in obscurity before 3 years of public ministry. Paul spent years in Arabia before his missionary journeys. If you are young right now, you might feel like your life has not started yet, like you are waiting for the real thing, like you are stuck in the boring part. Scripture says the boring part is the building part. You are not waiting for life to begin. Life has already begun, and what you do with the hidden years determines what kind of person will step into the visible years. By now you can see the pattern. Youth is not a season of delay. It is a season of formation. And the most dangerous lie a young person can believe is not that God is not real. It is that God can wait. Because the habits of youth do not stay in youth. They follow you. They shape your marriage. They shape your work. They shape your faith. They shape your body. They shape your mind. They shape your capacity for joy and suffering and love and sacrifice. A man at 50 does not suddenly become disciplined. He is harvesting what he planted at 20. A woman at 40 does not suddenly learn to pray. She is harvesting what she practiced in private when she was young. And if you spend your youth training your body for pleasure, your mind for distraction, your heart for comfort, and your soul for anything except God, you will arrive at middle age with a body, mind, heart, and soul that have been shaped by years of practice. The harvest does not lie about the seed. This is not about regret. This is not about wishing you were older. This is not about skipping joy. This is about not wasting the only youth you will ever have. Because one day, you will be old. Your body will slow down. Your energy will thin out. Your opportunities will narrow. Your time will feel shorter. And the youth you are living right now, these years, these days, these nights, will either be the foundation you stand on or the regret you carry. Solomon, old and tired, looking back at everything he built and tasted and owned, says it plainly. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come, before the years draw near when you will say, I have no pleasure in them, before the silver cord is snapped and the golden bowl is broken. Not because God will refuse you if you come late. The prodigal son proves otherwise. The thief on the cross proves otherwise. Grace is real, and mercy is wide. But mercy does not undo consequences. Forgiveness heals the relationship with God. It does not restore the wasted years. The prodigal came home to a feast. He did not come home to an untouched inheritance. So what should you carry away from all this? First, the Bible treats youth as a sacred season, not a waiting room. Solomon warns from the end of life. Paul trains Timothy from the beginning of ministry. Joseph, Daniel, and David show that private faithfulness in youth becomes public strength later. Second, if you are young right now, every habit you build, every decision you make, every desire you feed or starve, is forming the person you will become. You are not just passing time. You are building a life. And the foundation you pour today will hold or crack under the weight of tomorrow. And third, this is the one you cannot afford to forget. One day, you will be old. Your body will tell you what your youth already knew, but you refused to hear. Time is real. The window is open. And the question is not whether God will still welcome you later. The question is whether you are willing to lose everything sin takes between now and then. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth. Not because today is the last day you have, because today is forming the person you will be on the last day you have. So here's the question I want to leave with you. What is one thing you wish someone had told you about youth when you were younger? Tell me below. If you are still young, do not waste what God has placed in your hands. If you are older, your story is not over. But maybe your comment can help someone who is exactly where you once were. And if this opened something up in you, stay with this channel. Because the Bible does not flatter you, but it does free you. Remember your Creator. While you still have strength, while you still have time, while today is still today.